It's funny how human beings come into this world with two guaranteed talents: the ability to breathe and the ability to avoid anything that might make us uncomfortable. We don't need to learn it. Nobody has to teach it to us. It's as natural as blinking. We grow up thinking we're these rational, courageous creatures, but the truth is we spend a shocking amount of our lives pretending not to see what's right in front of us. The cracks in our relationships, the fears that keep us up at night, the dreams we've abandoned because they felt too heavy to carry. Most of us walk past them like we're strolling through a museum, hands behind our backs, politely refusing to touch anything real. And we do it with such confidence, such commitment, that it almost becomes admirable in a twisted kind of way. But this instinct isn't random. It's rooted in something deeply human, the fear that facing the truth will hurt more than hiding from it. We assume that if we turn our heads, shut the blinds, and put on a smile, the discomfort will magically resolve itself. We tell ourselves, later, I'll deal with it later. Except later becomes next month, and next month becomes 5 years, and one day we wake up realizing that later never came because we never let it. We built entire coping systems around avoiding the truth, and somewhere along the line, we started believing that was normal. And the world encourages it. We live in a culture that rewards busy schedules, constant distractions, and the ability to keep moving without ever stopping to think. You can drown in entertainment, numb yourself with notifications, distract yourself with noise. It's easier than sitting alone in silence and admitting, I'm not okay, or I'm scared, or I've been running from something that needs my attention. And because avoiding reality is so convenient, we dress it up to look like sensible decision making. We say things like, I've got too much going on right now, or this just isn't the right time, when the truth is we know the conversation, the change, the decision we're avoiding isn't going to get easier. We're just hoping the universe will do the work for us. But it won't. It never does. Life has this incredible talent for sitting patiently in the corner, waiting for you to acknowledge the thing you don't want to deal with. It doesn't scream, it doesn't threaten, it just waits. And eventually, when the wait becomes too much, it forces you to look, usually at the worst possible moment. Usually when you're tired, already overwhelmed, or trying to hold everything together with one emotional band. Aid. That's when you realize ignoring something doesn't make it disappear. It makes it grow teeth. And yet, we keep doing it. We avoid the tough conversations because we're afraid of hurting feelings. We avoid pursuing our dreams because failure feels like a personal indictment instead of a possibility. We avoid facing our past because we're scared it will define us. And we avoid our own emotions because somewhere along the way, we convinced ourselves that vulnerability is weakness. But here's the thing. Avoiding reality doesn't protect us. It isolates us. It keeps us living hives, present but disconnected, active but unfulfilled, alive but not awake. When we look at people who seem confident and grounded, we assume they were born that way. But the truth is they're usually the ones who got tired of running. They realized that facing reality, no matter how uncomfortable, was the only way to stop carrying the weight of avoidance. They learned that the truth isn't the enemy. Denial is. Avoidance is. Pretending is. Every time we look away, we reinforce the belief that we're not strong enough to face what's inside of us. And every time we choose courage, even in small moments, we slowly rebuild the trust we lost with ourselves. And it doesn't start with some grand gesture. Most of the time, it starts with being honest about something simple, like admitting that we've been surviving instead of living, that we've been performing instead of connecting, that we've been numb instead of present. It starts with tiny decisions, the kind that don't make headlines, but change everything internally. Choosing to sit with discomfort for a moment longer instead of escaping it. Choosing to tell the truth, even when it feels awkward. Choosing to ask for help instead of pretending we've got it all under control. These small acts of honesty chip away at the layers we've built around ourselves, and suddenly the world feels a little lighter, a little clearer, a little more manageable. And when you get honest with yourself, something else happens. The fear loses its power. The thing you've been avoiding stops looking like a monster and starts looking like something you can understand. And once you understand it, you can work with it. You can heal from it. You can outgrow it. But none of that can happen while you're still pretending it isn't there. Avoidance might feel safe, but it steals from you. It takes your time, your energy, your potential. It keeps you stuck in cycles that look like coincidence, but are really just consequences. And you deserve more than that. You deserve a life that isn't built on running, distracting, or denying. You deserve a life that feels steady, grounded, and honest. A life that reflects who you actually are. Not who you pretend to be, so the world doesn't judge you. So if you feel yourself avoiding something right now, if there's a truth you haven't spoken, a dream you haven't pursued, a feeling you haven't acknowledged, just know this: you are strong enough to face it. You are capable enough to handle it. And you are worthy enough to move through it, no matter how messy or overwhelming it seems. Avoidance keeps you small. Honesty sets you free. Because the moment you stop ignoring reality, you give yourself permission to finally start living. It's amazing how effortlessly we convince ourselves that everything is fine, even when we can feel the cracks forming beneath our feet. There's a strange comfort in pretending an odd sense of safety in looking the other way and telling ourselves that whatever is broken will magically fix itself if we just keep smiling long enough. And if we're good at anything as human beings, it's maintaining that performance, keeping our voices steady while our insides are exhausted, keeping our routines polished while our hearts are quietly sinking. We become experts at functioning even when we're falling apart in slow motion. But the truth is, pretending everything is fine comes with a cost we rarely acknowledge. It drains us inch by inch, day by day. It wears down our resilience because we're constantly using emotional energy to keep something covered, held together, or hidden. It's like holding a beach ball underwater. Sure, you can manage it for a while, but eventually it slips. And when it does, it comes flying to the surface with a force that surprises even you. And that's what happens with the emotions we avoid, the conversations we dodge, the truths we bury. They surface, sometimes gently, sometimes explosively, but they always come back. We like to pretend we're doing it to keep the peace, to keep things running smoothly, to avoid hurting someone else. But if we're honest, most of the time we do it to avoid hurting ourselves. We fear what happens when everything isn't fine. We fear the discomfort of admitting something's wrong. We fear the consequences that come with truth. So we settle into this familiar rhythm of denial, telling ourselves we just need to be strong enough, patient enough, quiet enough. And for a while, it works. But only for a while. You can feel the cost in your body before you ever acknowledge it in your mind. The tension in your shoulders, the tightness in your chest, the fatigue that doesn't go away even when you rest, the sense of being disconnected from your own life. These are the signals we ignore because we've convinced ourselves that stopping to listen would make everything collapse. We think that if we admit our feelings out loud, if we name what hurts, if we acknowledge what's not working, we'll open a floodgate we can't control. So we keep wiping the fog off the mirror instead of asking why it's foggy in the first place. But pretending everything is fine doesn't protect us from pain. It prolongs it. It keeps us from healing because healing requires honesty. And honesty requires courage. When you pretend, you're not avoiding the problem. You're living inside it. You're choosing to carry its weight every single day. And that weight becomes part of your identity. You start believing that this is just how life is supposed to feel: heavy, muffled, manageable, but never fulfilling. You convince yourself that burnout is normal, that emotional distance is practical, that numbness is maturity. But none of that is true. That's just the cost of pretending. And the cost shows up in your relationships. When you keep insisting you're fine, the people around you stop asking. Not because they don't care, but because you've taught them that your inner world is off limits, untouchable. You build a wall and call it independence. You create distance and name it strength. But deep down, there's a part of you that aches for connection, that wants someone to notice the heaviness behind your smile, that hopes someone will see the truth you've been hiding even from yourself. The cost also shows up in your ambitions. When you pretend everything is fine, you stop dreaming bigger. You start settling. You talk yourself out of opportunities, out of risks, out of growth, because deep down you know you don't have the emotional energy to carry anything new. You're too busy holding the broken pieces of your life together to reach for anything better. And eventually, you forget that you're allowed to want more. But here's the hardest part. You start losing trust in yourself. Because every time you say, I'm fine, when you're not, you teach your mind that your feelings don't matter. You teach your heart that its signals are inconvenient. You teach your intuition that its whispers are irrelevant. And the longer you do that, the harder it becomes to hear yourself at all. You lose the internal compass that was supposed to guide you because you silenced it long ago in the name of comfort. The cost of pretending everything is fine isn't just emotional, it's a slow erosion of self-respect. Every time you avoid the truth, you reinforce the belief that you can't handle it. And the tragedy of that is simple: you can. You always could. But you were too afraid to see what facing the truth would demand from you: change, courage, vulnerability, action. And maybe that's the heart of it. Pretending keeps us in the familiar, even if the familiar is hurting us. It creates a predictable world where nothing has to shift, where we don't have to confront our fears or challenge our patterns. But the life you want, the peace you crave, the strength you imagine for yourself, they don't grow in the dark. They don't grow in denial. They grow in the light of truth, uncomfortable as it may be. When you finally stop pretending everything is fine, it doesn't mean your world falls apart. It means it finally has permission to rebuild. It means you get to lay down the weight you've been carrying. You get to breathe without bracing for impact. You get to feel without apologizing. You get to reconnect to the parts of yourself you thought were gone forever. And yes, the truth might hurt at first, but it hurts with purpose. It hurts because it's moving something. It hurts because it's freeing something. And once you move through that initial discomfort, you find a steadiness that pretending never promised. You find clarity. You find relief. You find strength that was waiting for you on the other side of honesty. Because the cost of pretending everything is fine will always be higher than the cost of facing what isn't. And the moment you stop pretending is the moment you start healing. Awareness is one of those things we talk about as if it's simple. If it's simple, almost effortless, like it's just a matter of paying attention or being present. But if you've ever actually tried to live with real awareness, you know it's not simple at all. It's uncomfortable, inconvenient, and at times deeply unsettling. Because awareness asks you to see things exactly as they are, not as you wish they were, not as you pretend they are, and not as someone else told you they should be. And in a world that thrives on distraction and denial, choosing awareness becomes an act of rebellion. Most people spend their lives living on the surface of things. They skim through conversations, skim through problems, skim through their own emotions, like they're scanning headlines instead of actually reading the story. It's easier that way. Surface living doesn't ask much of us. It doesn't require honesty or depth or courage. It lets us stay comfortable, even if that comfort is costing us clarity, connection, and growth. And somewhere along the line, we started mistaking comfort for peace. But comfort without awareness isn't peace. It's sedation. When you begin choosing awareness, everything changes. Suddenly, you start noticing the things you used to walk past. You catch the subtle ways you shut down when something hurts. You notice the excuses you've been using for years. You hear the tone in your own voice when you say you're fine. You feel the weight in your chest when you're not being true to yourself. Awareness doesn't let you glide through life on autopilot anymore, because it keeps tapping you on the shoulder, reminding you that something needs attention, something needs honesty, something needs you to show up. And showing up can be terrifying, because awareness asks you to take responsibility for your life. Not just the parts you're proud of, not just the parts you want people to see, but the parts you've buried, avoided, or hidden. It asks you to stop pointing fingers outward and start looking inward. It asks you to acknowledge your patterns, your fears, your habits, your reactions. And that level of honesty can shake the ground beneath your feet. But the thing people misunderstand is that awareness doesn't shame you. It wakes you. It whispers, you deserve better than the version of life you've accepted. It nudges you toward truth, toward alignment, toward authenticity. Not because it wants to expose you, but because it wants to free you. In a world that feeds off distraction, awareness is threatening. It slows you down when everything around you screams to speed up. It asks you to be intentional when everything around you encourages you to numb out. And when you choose awareness, you stop being manageable. You stop being predictable. You stop being easily influenced. That's why it feels rebellious, because the world is built on systems that depend on your disconnect. But awareness cuts through all that noise. It brings you back to yourself. And something else happens when you start living consciously. You begin to see things that once slipped right past you. You recognize the patterns in your relationships. You notice when someone's words and actions don't align. You feel the emotional shifts in a room. You understand when your body is asking for rest, when your mind is overwhelmed, when your spirit is depleted. You become attuned to the truth, not because you're looking for it, but because you're no longer hiding from it. And that clarity, once you taste it, you can't unknow it. You can't go back to pretending. You can't go back to the half versions of yourself you used to present to the world. You can't unsee the ways you've dimmed your own light to keep the peace. Awareness makes you more accountable, yes, but it also makes you more alive. And that aliveness is powerful. It helps you break cycles you thought were permanent. It helps you make choices that honor who you are instead of who you think you're supposed to be. It helps you build relationships rooted in truth instead of convenience. And maybe most importantly, it helps you stop abandoning yourself, because awareness teaches you to pause, to breathe, to ask, what's really happening here? And that one question becomes a doorway. It opens up space for reflection instead of reaction. It creates room for compassion for yourself and others. It gives you time to evaluate whether something is aligned with your values or just aligned with your fears. That pause is where your life begins to shift. And the more you practice awareness, the more natural it becomes. You start catching yourself before you slip into old habits. You recognize when you're avoiding something and you gently pull yourself back. You begin making decisions rooted in intention instead of impulse. And that shift, the shift from unconscious living to conscious choice, is one of the most transformative experiences a person can have. It doesn't mean you'll never struggle. It doesn't mean you'll always know what to do. Awareness isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about waking up to your own life so you can participate in it fully. It's about choosing honesty over comfort, clarity over chaos, truth over illusion. And yes, it can be exhausting at times. Awareness makes you feel things deeply, see things clearly, and question things bravely. But the alternative is drifting through life half, asleep, repeating patterns you never chose, reacting to experiences you never understood, and wondering why everything feels slightly off. Awareness opens the door to true freedom. Not the superficial kind, not the performative kind. The kind that comes from knowing who you are and choosing to live in alignment with that truth. It connects you back to your own voice, your own intuition, your own power. It gives you the ability to navigate life with intention instead of fear. And maybe that's why awareness is the most rebellious act in modern life. It demands that you stop surrendering your life to habits, distractions, expectations, and illusions. It demands that you reclaim your mind, your heart, and your choices. It demands that you stop settling for a life that looks good and start building one that feels true. Because when you stop ignoring reality and start choosing awareness, you stop merely surviving and finally start living.